is up, metal and heavy music fans? It's Flight of Icarus again with MetalTrenches.com, and today we have a review of Mental Cruelty and their new album A Hill to Die Upon via Unique Leader Records. And hey, if you like to be kept up to date with the best and brightest metal bands and albums from the underground and above, then stick with me by hitting that subscribe button down below. Mental Cruelty is a German deathcore band that caught my attention in a big way with Inferis in 2019. This ended up being one of my favorite deathcore albums of that year with its perfect balance of impressive performances and brainstem massaging groove. This also left me very excited for A Hill to Die Upon, but did it set the bar too high?
It's too damn high.
Starting with what I like, Mental Cruelty have definitely stepped up the symphonic elements on this one. You get more Dimmu Borgir-inspired flourishes of synth on tracks like Eternal Eclipse that make for some pretty epic-sounding moments. These are definitely fitting of the music video for the title track in particular, with the big landscapes and mountains, the cold black metal aesthetic of it all. There's a very kind of Abath vibe, lots of black metal claws in the air. Definitely a fun song in a fun video. When paired with the brutal vocals, the most obvious comparison is easily Shadow of Intent. And speaking of the vocals, this is definitely one of the strongest elements of the band's sound. Solid variety here. You've got those deep gutturals, you've got the high-pitched shrieks, you got kind of a little bit of everything going on here, sometimes layered, sometimes one after another. This all makes for an album that is inarguably super heavy and can be quite fun. But there are also some problems that keep it from becoming one of my favorites. Above all else, where are the riffs? This was a big part of what got me into Mental Cruelty to begin with. Unfortunately, this album is built largely on very generic sounding chugs and rhythm parts. There are definitely some cool solos and sweep transitions that prove their continued ability as musicians, but outside of that, the whole thing ends up severely lacking in terms of personality. Yeah, the vocals there sound pretty sick, no question, but I'm getting nothing from the guitar at all. This ends up being a problem for many of the tracks, and as a result, there aren't as many standout moments to hold on to. They're there, just not nearly as much as they should be. Just compare that last clip to one of the many moments on the latest Brand of Sacrifice album. It's just no contest. It's not even fair, really. There's a reason why that song was stuck in my head for days. You gotta bring those hooks, especially in this genre. Certain songs like Death Worship and especially Eternal Eclipse deliver at times, but by and large the riffs either feel recycled or are just too buried in the mix. And once more, I know from Mental Cruelty's previous material that they are capable of doing this better. Aside from the guitars, the overall dynamics can be a little lacking as well. They do come up here and there with the acoustic intro and melodic portion of the overall admittedly solid single Ultima Hypocrita, but even then the execution feels a little bit off. You've got almost 1 minute and 50 seconds of kind of the same thing, just sort of dragged out, so this ends up being a little bit dull and drawn within this portion. You've got the ups and downs, but those quieter sections need to be interesting as well. It feels like it's trying to be more grand than maybe it actually is. Compare this again to this down moment on Brand of Sacrifice's Lifeblood. Which one grabs your attention more? Which one is going to stick with you longer? The transition back to loud is also much more rewarding because it marries the sounds together instead of feeling like, okay, end this part now, start new part. And yeah, they add in the Rings of Saturn feature on here. Like, it's a great solo. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think it really elevates the composition beyond what it would be without him. A good guest feature should be additive. For instance, this edition of the Black Dahlia Murders Trevor Strand on Shadow of Intent's song Barren and Breathless Macrocosm. Trevor just brings a completely different vocal range and sound that wouldn't be possible without him. It's that interplay of him and Ben's differences that make it interesting. Similarly, there is just too much uniformity from song to song as well. There are certainly differing elements, but ultimately this falls into the same criticism that I had in my Distant review. You take a step back and it all sort of blends together. This is definitely the better of the two by far, but it's still a similar category of shortcomings. Look, ultimately, I'm not saying that this album is bad by any means. In fact, it can be quite fun. Like I said, Death Worship is just a groovy, brutal banger that never fails to get my head bobbing, and Eternal Eclipse has some pretty fire melodeath riffs amidst the Dimmu Borgir style synths. The title track is no doubt a banger. When I listen to this, I have a good time. It's just that once more, personally, I would have liked a little bit more.
Please, sir. I want some more.
Turning to my scales, I give A Hill to Die Upon an 8 for enjoyability. Like I said, it's a good time. It's a little bit above average even in this department. When you're listening, there's not going to be moments where you hate it. It's just with some of the really great albums I've heard in the genre lately, it doesn't quite stack up. I give it an 8 for musicianship. There are some really solid performances on here. Again, the solos in particular. The vocals are fantastic, but ultimately the songwriting just isn't quite up in those top ranks. And I give it a 7 for innovation. Again, very typical deathcore going on here. You're not going to get a whole lot of bells and whistles, not a lot of things that you haven't heard a million times before, and generally that's fine. So a 7.7 overall and a C+ for Mental Cruelty and A Hill to Die Upon. Get it again via Unique Leader Records. Y'all, if you want more of my thoughts on where deathcore works for me and then where it doesn't, check out my full reviews of Brand of Sacrifice and Distant. And then hey, just stick around in general because I got plenty more videos coming right after this one. More full album reviews, interviews with bands on the podcast, tier lists, you name it, we've got it, so plenty of reasons to subscribe. Let me know down in the comments what's your favorite deathcore album so far this year, and don't forget to hit that like button, join the Discord, and support on Patreon. But that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.